Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers heading into tonight are officially at the halfway point of the 2023-24 season. We give our evaluations and grades to Darvin Ham and surprises and disappointment and all kinds of stuff coming up next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out and see the show and talk to over 22,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom are wondering whether or not the Lakers are going to turn around in the second half of the season. 20 and 21 heading into tonight's game against the Dallas Mavericks. Early start, which we'll talk about, 5:30, which is kind of curious for a home game. So tonight is game 42, which means we are officially at the halfway point. We're going to break it all down, Andy. We do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So as we start these evaluations here, Andy, I think it is fair to say that at 20 and 21, broadly, it's been kind of disappointing, right? I'm not overreacting to that.
No, there's no kind of disappointing about a team that we thought might have the opportunity to build on a Western Conference Finals run with all the continuity they brought back and a roster that seemed improved on paper. And they are currently this game coming up against Dallas, which, by the way, you mentioned 5:30 local tip, very unusual. Lakers looking to get to 500 again. Catch every Lakers game on the hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Lakers. Don't know yet about the availability of Luka Doncic. He is listed as questionable. Dante Exum is, I believe, out.
Thank God for that.
Or at minimum questionable. I think he may be out. Either way, they should guard him even if he's on the bench. But this obviously has been a very underwhelming first half to the season. You know, last year the Lakers were struggling to, get within 5 games of 500. And while that was an absolute tire fire of a season to slog through and as unpleasant, like just aesthetically unpleasant as any Lakers season in recent memory, it went worse than we expected, but the idea that it would go this bad wasn't necessarily impossible to imagine. This clearly is not what we had in mind at all.
And the record from last year to this year is really not that much different through 41 games. Game or so different, a couple games different. So you put all those things together. I agree with you. It's been a disappointing season. So we're going to talk about our biggest surprises, our biggest disappointments. We're going to grade Darvin Ham. We're going to talk about trades and the possibility of midseason improvements. What players you might want to target, what types of players you think are important. So all of that coming up in today's episode. We'll start with this one. What has been your biggest surprise, Andy? Who's been your biggest surprise in the 23-24 season so far?
Anthony Davis. Like, in the sense that he is playing at this level on both ends without injury. And hopefully I'm not jinxing anything simply by going here, but I'm also answering the question honestly. Mm-hmm. That's it. And look, I'm somebody who's always believed in AD's talent, but not necessarily the ability to stay on the court in order to truly bring that talent regularly to fruition. But also, too, like the idea of whether or not Anthony Davis is truly built to be an everybody get on my back kind of player. Like, there have been times where temperamentally he hasn't always seemed to be that guy. Like, I don't mean like, not an alpha male. Not everybody is absolutely built to be that guy, like physically or mentally. This season, and it's felt really refreshing to see in light of his extension that he signed last offseason that goes well beyond LeBron for the first time in his career, he has conducted himself on and off the court like a franchise face. Like, it's a shame it is not being capitalized on in the way that it should be. But this is, other than maybe AD's first season with the Lakers, this is like one of the only times he's been with his organization where no matter what is going on, you can't look in his direction because that dude is not a problem.
I think this question, like, you look around the roster and there is no other answer other than Anthony Davis. And it sounds weird. It might sound weird to some people to say this about a guy who has he been an all-star basically every year he's been healthy?
With the Lakers?
So.
I think
no,
so.
just period. And like throughout his career, basically, he's been, maybe, I'm not sure, go back to like his first season or something, but he has basically been an all-star every season he's been healthy. He is a max player. He's a superstar. But if you think about this question based on like, what are your preseason expectations and who has exceeded them? It's unquestionably Anthony Davis. Like, he's really the only guy on the roster, because even LeBron, I think, you look at him, it's like, wow, age 39, still doing stuff like this, really impressive. But I wouldn't say he's necessarily exceeded my expectations. In the last 3 or 4 weeks has been a little less.
Sometimes LeBron gets graded on a curve in terms of people being impressed that he can still do certain things at his age, which is admittedly amazing. But talked about before, I think LeBron's numbers can sometimes be misleading in terms of his overall effect on the team. And
Right.
Either way, you are correct. The last month, LeBron has not performed at the level that has been needed, or I think the standard that, if nothing else, LeBron likes to see.
I don't want to make this an argument about LeBron, because I think he's still been quite good. But the beginning of the season, that first 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, the first 20 games, 25, whatever it is, he was something different. Something much closer to like a time machine kind of LeBron. And that has slowed down. The guy who has consistently performed the expectation and answered all those questions is AD. And he's doing it on both sides of the ball. And he's doing it with consistency and force. And, every once in a while, there's a half or a game or something where you say, that wasn't great. But I mean, I think, didn't Jokic have a game earlier this season where he had like 5 points and like 4 of 23 shooting or something?
Look, remember,
like that?
AD had a bad half either in the first or second game of the season, and that led SportsCenter for like a week. Like,
right.
I'm not even exaggerating.
No, you're not. It's absolutely. And I mean, it's really cool to see how well he has performed, and disappointing that it's not going to be rewarded. And the way the Lakers are playing right now is going to cost him at the very least a DPOY, a Defensive Player of the Year. And it's certainly going to cost him a shot at the MVP. And it's a shame, because he is performing at that level. And even for like, I remember we did a show last year. Was it last year in the preseason, where it's like, I cop to like, you know what? I need to not harp on all the things that, AD's not giving. It's like he has a bad game here, there, or whatever it is. And do have to acknowledge just how good he is. Like, the context of criticism needs to be within that. He is really, really great. And then you say, but is he one of those ultra elite guys that seems to match the capabilities? This year, that's what we're getting. We're getting that guy who is on the level of, everyone save maybe like Embiid and Jokic, and Giannis, maybe this year. I mean, it's been really impressive to watch. That's the happy stuff, Andy. Now we have to get to the sad stuff. Disappointments. Far more people to choose from in that category than biggest surprise. Unfortunately for the Lakers, we will get to that and grades for Darvin Ham next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by eBay Motors, and passion, drive, patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, or all the above, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring that win home. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
Okay, so we talked about our biggest surprise. I'm really curious. Leave us comments in the YouTube page or tweet us at Cam Brothers. I'm curious if people accept the framing that we're talking about here with Anthony Davis. Are you surprised by how well he is playing this year and what he has given the Lakers, even relative to his status as a superstar? Andy, who is your biggest disappointment this year?
Oh, it's Gabe Vincent. I mean, his absence beyond what they are missing from him as a player, the opportunity cost of potentially going elsewhere with that, that non-taxpayer mid-level money. I'll tell you right now, if they didn't try their damnedest to keep Dennis Schroeder, that is really feeling like a mistake on multiple levels. But it's also Gabe Vincent's absence has complicated the rotation and what to do in ways that quite possibly have led to Darvin Ham overthinking some of his moves. But it also complicates, too, what the Lakers can and can't do on the trade market, because right now, D'Angelo Russell, he lives on the block. He's been traded by every team he's ever played for, including
D'Lo from the block.
Right, including the team he currently plays for. They've traded him. They're the ones that got the whole cycle moving. Originally, they can't move D'Lo without getting a ball handler back or a side deal for a different ball handler. And that is completely because of Gabe Vincent being out this whole season and not knowing when he's going to be back, or not knowing what you're going to get from him, how he fits with this team, if and when he does return this season. So to me, it's Gabe Vincent.
Yeah, it's funny. I went through a lot of these, and I had Vincent on my list for a long time. And then I decided, and I apologize if this is too semantic-y, but I decided that the Gabe Vincent thing, all of the stuff that you just described, is really disappointing. But I couldn't put him as my biggest disappointment because he hasn't played. It's not his fault he got hurt. So I tried to. I was really trying to think of the guys who have been on the floor. There have been a lot of disappointments for the Lakers in terms of injuries. Rui has been kind of disappointing just because his play's been okay, but he just hasn't been able to play enough because he's been hurt all the time. And this is going to sound unfair, I think, to some fans, because it gets to relative expectations. And maybe mine were too high coming into the year. My biggest disappointment is Austin Reaves. And it's not because he hasn't played well. He was hot garbage at the beginning of the season. He was that guy at the beginning of the season. And he has since turned it more into the Austin Reaves that we know and love. But I do think you tweeted this out the other day. There's he has not reached the level of a guy who can, be a reliable third best player on a championship caliber team. And that's not an insult to him. He is still an excellent player and a massive bargain at $14 million a year. It was not a mistake to sign Reaves to that deal. But the leap hasn't happened. I think putting Russell and Reaves back together could help facilitate something like that, because it allows Reaves to play more to his strengths. We talked in Monday's show about the difference between a facilitator and a connector, or for Tuesday's show, I should say. And Reaves is better at connecting than facilitating and running the offense. But he hasn't quite made that leap. And I think the Lakers were expecting a leap, and it hasn't come. And so it's not that he's been bad. It's just that he hasn't been quite what has been expected and what the Lakers needed.
I was going to say,
really wanted to jump up.
It's not even just the idea of what was needed and expected from Reaves by the front office, who again, agree with you. He is a good player, but they overestimated, I think, his readiness for this. And the roster was constructed with that readiness being there,
right?
In terms of a hierarchy, in terms of deciding, you know what, we can forego. Yeah, I don't know if it could have been possible to clear the decks, try to get Kyrie Irving, and Reaves would have been basically the only guy they could have possibly retained.
Right. And we both of us thought it was a bad idea to do that.
Look, someone in the comments section of Tuesday's show noted that you and I were, I believe he said, all in our feelings about Kyrie Irving. Look at the way he's playing right now. Look at the way the roster is this year. There is still time for everything with Kyrie to play out. And even the biggest Kyrie optimists in Dallas, I think, would agree.
Right. I wasn't a Kyrie naysayer for one season. I was a Kyrie naysayer for multiple seasons.
Right. But look, if it turns out Kyrie under long-term contract with the Mavericks ends up a really good thing for Dallas, I will admit I was wrong. That being said, though, I was absolutely not wrong for having the concerns that I had. I will stand by that. But either way, though, it still would have required Kyrie taking a pay cut, which, he'd already lost a lot of money along the way. Who knows if that would have been an option? But part of what led the Lakers to not go that route was, I believe, the belief that Reaves was ready to be, if not at the level of Kyrie, that's delusional, but like at the level of, say, Kevin Love when he was the third guy with Cleveland, or close enough that with the rest of the guys behind him, D'Lo, Rui, Christian Wood, etc., that would be enough.
I think there's still a chance for him to. You remember last year he really made a leap second half, and so first half he kind of assimilates to the new role, new responsibility, new whatever. There's certainly a chance he gets better over the course of the second half. He learns and he improves. I think that's still there, but it's not that he's been bad. It's just that he hasn't been as good, I think, as they hoped. Let's start on Darvin, because I want to save a little bit of time for the types of players that the Lakers ought to acquire. And Darvin, your thoughts about Darvin, I think, are related to this. So, if you had to give that man a grade, Andy, what would your grade be?
I gave this some thought. I'm going with a C-.
Okay.
And there have been issues that I think are outside of Darvin's control in terms of some of the decisions that he's made that both of us haven't liked, or roster rotation moves that have not worked out, like things that, and also I think have been ascribed to Darvin, very often rhyme with Pori and Trentz, that I think aren't necessarily fair to Darvin either, or sometimes even the guy whose name rhymes with Pori and Trentz. People are often looking for reasons to be upset with Darvin. That said, though, increasingly over this year, it has felt more and more like Darvin hasn't known what he's looking for, like beyond the decisions themselves. Like he's not sure what he's seeking out. And I remember like a couple weeks ago, I did a rundown of a bunch of different moments from the season, like when D'Lo and Reaves were initially split up, Reaves going to the bench, or the all defense lineup with Cam and Vando both starting, which meant reuniting D'Lo and Reaves on the bench, or declaring essentially sight unseen that he was, or very small sample size, that he was committing to Rui being in the starting lineup, even though he had been screwing pretty wildly with Rui's role all year. Or you can even take it back to the 5-out system that he implemented coming off a postseason run that didn't scream, we need to change the system, or I think not playing in a way that best take advantage of a 5-out system, or even having the best personnel for it to begin with. I think most of these things individually could be explained in ways that feel logical or at least reasonable. But when they're all taken together, they have felt very often like a coach that doesn't know what he wants or how to land on it. There have been enough reports, or I think even polite grumbling from players to
on the record post-game comments.
To let you know, like, it's not just me or you or fans or media who doesn't get it. And this is the most important reason that I would go with C-. It is, you've seen very little evidence of Darvin growing as a coach. Like at best, he's flatlined. At worst, you can make an argument of regression. So I'd go C-.
All right. I will give my grade, and we'll talk about potential trade candidates and what the Lakers ought to be looking for in a trade next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp, and we have just wrapped up December, about halfway into January. Those were a month and a half, 45 days with a lot of holidays, which can be really fun for a lot of people, but stressful and even depressing for others. You spend a lot of time around family you don't always get along with. These holidays can take an economic toll. The idea of New Year's resolutions, trying to find the best version of yourself, of your life, can be inspiring or at times really daunting. And therapy can be a really bright spot amidst the anxiety and uncertainty that can cause. I can personally speak to how much therapy helped me during a really difficult period in my life for me and my family. Sitting down, talking with a professional made a massive difference. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, accessible anywhere, 100% online, no waiting rooms, traffic, and it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season, we are in the midst of the playoffs. The first weekend was a lot of fun. Unless you're a Rams fan and that Detroit thing kind of bugs you, but still a great game. There's a lot of time to get in on the action of all, throughout the NFL playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Great way to get involved. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is super easy to use, and there are many, many, many ways to bet. You got your live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That is the best way to find popular parlays and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. So assuming we're going back to the old school style of grades where C was average, I am right there with you, Andy. I was sort of C- teetering on D+ for Darvin. And the caveat I put in here, because I don't think he's been average. If C is average, I think he's been below average. But I will say this. The coursework is very, very hard. It's like he's got like a C- or a D+ in like AP calculus, or he's at Harvard Law or something where it's hard to get a good grade. In an easier class, he'd be doing well. You put your finger on it for me. It's that I don't think he's gotten better. I think the circumstances that he's coaching under this year, the context has changed. And I don't think he's adjusted well to it. And that to me is the biggest reason I think he gets the grade that he gets. If we weren't doing players for biggest disappointment, my biggest disappointment would be Darvin Ham. Just because I don't think he's progressed in the same way that you judge players and grade players and stuff like that on how they get better from year to year. Just don't think he's done it. So I don't think he's a terrible coach, and I think he can learn. And again, I think he's been dealt a really hard hand. I just don't think he's played it very well. So I'm right there with you. Let's look at trades, because I think to some degree, a lot of the answer about what, at least for me, what kind of players you want, or specifically who you would want, is related to your view of Darvin. So with that in mind, Andy, I know it is for me. How are you looking at this trade question?
I am inclined to try to add to what is there, as opposed to trying to land one, I guess, big name while potentially gutting the depth, because depending on who the name is, or I think more accurately isn't, I'm not sure that doesn't end up more of like a cosmetic lateral move than something that actually helps the team. Like, for example, he's been linked to the Lakers ever since he left, but Alex Caruso, he's got a very, very, you could argue he has the best contract in the NBA. He's a first team all defense guard, like an elite defensive guard who's making 7 figures annually. If, say, you could bring him in for Taurean Prince, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Maxwell Lewis, a first, maybe another protected first or a second. And I say this because people, believe it or not, I imagine it's going to take a lot to get Alex Caruso because the bidding will be big for all the reasons I just mentioned around the league.
He's one of the few players that's out there on the market potentially who is elite at something
and can fit,
genuinely elite,
and can fit anywhere. You can plug in Alex Caruso anywhere. So I think it's going to take at least an unprotected first with other stuff there. Prince would be there to balance the salaries, or, like Dorian Finney-Smith. If, say, you could get him for Taurean Prince, Jalen Hood-Schifino, protected first, or maybe even an unprotected, might have to swap in Max Christie for Jalen Hood-Schifino, though I'd rather not. But someone like him, I think can, because I think he is a better version of Taurean Prince. They're about the same as shooters, but I think he is a better overall defender. I think, and he's somebody that's under contract the following year, so he can help you continue building what you have, assuming it works from this point moving forward. But like, if you start looking at, say, like DeMar DeRozan, or like DeMar DeRozan with Caruso, and you start having to move D'Lo and Rui, likely at least a first and whatever on top of it, like, do you get that much better? Because D'Lo and DeMar DeRozan, look at the numbers. They're really not much different, especially if you go to like per 36. D'Angelo Russell's numbers are arguably better than DeRozan's. So unless like you think Caruso helps you out that much more than what you have there, I'm wondering if to some degree with a lot of the bigger names attached, DeJounte Murray, neither one of us even wants to go the Zach LaVine route, but just these guys who will require more players, more rotation players just for the salary to make happen, I'm not sure it actually makes the Lakers any better.
Yeah, I mean, here's kind of how I look at it. Like, I'm with you. Like the basic players, like it's hard to know without knowing exactly who, what it is that you're giving up to know whether it's a good deal. Because especially if you're trading away multiple players, like the combination of those players for who you get back really matters, because that's what your rotation looks like.
Well, some of them you're just going to have to do to make the money work.
Sure. On a list of players that like, obviously Alex Caruso would be awesome. Like, he is a defensive stopper. You could play him with anyone. He's up to 40%. He's really turned himself quietly into a good shooter, 3-point shooter on, like legitimate volume. I think he's shooting 4 or 5 threes a game now. And so he would be a real difference maker. I love DeMar DeRozan. I think he'd be a good fit next to LeBron and AD. I think Dorian Finney-Smith could be a good fit, and all that. But what I really am looking for is clarity, because the biggest mistake the Lakers could make at this deadline is acquiring someone that doesn't have a definitive superiority in some place. Dorian Finney-Smith is a role player, but you think would be able to sort of slide into, a spot, maybe kind of like you say, the Taurean Prince role or whatever it might be, to play where you're not adding extra confusion to the roster. You get a good player back, but now he joins a log jam. Maybe you don't have to even give up that much to get him, but now he joins kind of a log jam in the front court where we're already sitting here like, how do you get Christian Wood on the floor and Rui and, Max Christie and all these other guys? Like, they need to come out of this trade deadline, if they make a move, with clarity, because then Darvin's job gets easier, not harder. And what they have to avoid doing is at the deadline doing something that actually makes Darvin's job harder, because like you say, is it really clear that the players they got are better than the ones that they sent out? That to me, if they're going to fix this quickly through the trade deadline, I don't think you can expect to replicate what happened last year. Every year you try to do it with some sort of massive turnover. It's got to be something where the end result is simple and you plug it in and you go.
Which actually, when you look back on last season, whether you think in retrospect, last season, the moves they made at the deadline were just sort of right place, right time, right moment, or sustainable this year, either way, they actually were made with a lot of clarity. Like they actually were kind of shockingly simple to make work in terms of roles that were clear and easy to understand. Like, for example, I like DeJounte Murray, and I certainly like him more as a target over Zach LaVine. But
Sure.
and there are positives I can come up with for bringing in Murray, but my biggest apprehension is it's always somewhat complicated, if not very complicated, to put a ball dominant guard who's not an established outside shooter alongside LeBron. That fit can take time to make work, and the Lakers don't have time.
I'm concerned about the time thing. I'm concerned, but like you mentioned last year, the only thing though, I agree with you, they kind of fell into but the roster was so imbalanced last year that just by like acquiring forwards, like getting wings, suddenly made the roster more playable. It didn't matter who the wings were because they didn't have any. They had centers and guards. That's all they had on that roster. And so you get yourself some wings. Now you have a real rotation. It gets much easier for Darvin to deploy these guys in ways that don't make people freak out now because all he has is guards. That's not what they have this year. This year, they do have a relatively balanced roster. It's in terms of positionality, it's just flawed. And Darvin hasn't figured out the best way to deploy them, and the injuries haven't helped and all that. You can't muddy that up. So if you trade role-playing wings, you need to get a guard or something like that, and like you acquire a role-playing wing. That role-playing wing needs to be definitively better. Or just the marching orders have to be, this guy's going to play. He's going to start. We're acquiring Dorian Finney-Smith. He's going to start and play 32 minutes a game. And that's how this is going to go. You can organize the rest of it. Yeah. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Last year to this year just doesn't feel the same. So it's like, I'm thinking less about individual players. I mentioned the guys that I like. I'm not trying to duck the question, but what I'm really worried about is making the situation more complicated through a trade.
The last thing I would want to bring up, just because we don't have a ton of time, but I would like to leave on a little bit of positivity, because obviously there's been a lot of struggle we've documented. If you're looking for something to be optimistic about in the second half of the season, the Lakers, their offense has been a problem this year. It's been a problem, frankly, for a lot of the LeBron and AD era. But this season specifically, for all of the problems we've talked about with three-point shooting and spacing and scheme and blah, 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 if you look at their overall percentages from 2 and 3, they're somewhere between good and good enough, fine. You know, from 3, they're not great, but they're actually quietly not awful either. They're not unacceptably awful. A way that they could immediately make their offense 5 or 6 points better a game: stop turning the effing ball over all the time. I have beat this drum I have beat this drum all season. This team does not take enough shots. That is one of the reasons why the offense sucks. They literally don't take enough shots. Not even they don't make enough, they don't take enough. A big reason that they don't take enough is because they're crapping away possessions, throwing the ball in the 6th row for no particular reason. If they stop doing that and change nothing else, the offense will look demonstratively better, because it's literally mathematically impossible for it not to. So there's your positivity. And that's within their control.
The Lakers have beaten good teams this year. Mm-hmm. They have not played consistently. They have not shown but night to night, particularly when they have their guys. I saw an interesting stat from our friend Crangus McBasketball Team _NBA that noted the Lakers on the games they weren't missing at least 3 rotation players and weren't on the second night of a back-to-back are on a 50-win pace. So look, I mean, it's a lot of ifs and caveats, and every other team is playing with these things and missing guys and whatever, and they've been better. It's not that. The point is that you can argue, like, when the circumstances are a little bit better, that the team has actually performed better than it might appear. I replied to that. I'm like, how many games is that? Like 4? Because it seems like they've been missing more than 3 rotation players in every game this season. And every game is the second night of a back-to-back, but it's actually 27. And so that's a decent enough sample size. So that was a great statistic if you're looking to feel better about it. And I hope I conveyed it correctly, but you can check his timeline again, Tim_NBA, to get it exactly right. So, I mean, look, they did it last year. They're not going to be top 4. That's where I thought they'd be. That ain't happening. But they could get out of the play-in and make some noise and be, at the very least, replicate what they did last year, be playing well going into the postseason. So let us know what you think about all of these things, all of these categories. We'd love to talk about it on, maybe not for tomorrow, because we're talking about tonight's game, but 4 shows for the rest of the week. Want to get your reaction to all of this stuff.
Yeah, a reminder, the Lakers are playing the Mavericks tonight, 5:30 Pacific time, unusual time, and the Lakers trying to get back to 500. Don't know yet about the availability of Luka Doncic. You can catch every Lakers game on the hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Lakers.
All right, we'll see everybody after the game.